Amanda took hold of my arm as the truck went sideways. She said, "Ethan, we won't make it back." In the dark taxi, my best friend's mother was crushed up against me while snow battered the windshield. She said, "We'll have to keep each other warm if the engine dies." My own heartbeat was the only sound I could hear for a moment. Slush sprayed against the guardrail as the truck pulled back into the lane once the rear tires finally caught. I lifted my foot off the throttle and released a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "All right," I responded, trying to maintain my composure. "We're okay. I possess it." She continued to dig into my bicep with her fingers. Amanda's eyes widened in the dashboard illumination as she gazed at me. One eye's mascara was somewhat smeared. The dark hair had mostly given up and was put into a loose bun. The mother of my best friend Jake. I had known her since I was 10 years old. In addition, I had no business thinking about the woman about my recent behavior. "Remind me never to let you drive me anywhere again if this is fine to you," she remarked, attempting to seem light but falling short. I forced a flimsy smile. "It was you who demanded to accompany me." She gave an eye roll. "You thought I would let you drive up I-70 by yourself during a snowstorm to pick up a dumb generator for my house. Jake would murder me." I said, "Jake is stuck in Phoenix due to the storm. You would be sitting in the dark by now if I hadn't gone." She took a quick look at the dash clock. It was around 8 o'clock. Hours before, the sky over the Colorado mountains had gone from gray to black. The dense white veil in front of us was only barely penetrated by the headlights. I had made a dozen trips down this section of roadway, close to Evergreen. This was the longest it had ever felt. The wipers screeched over the glass as a burst of wind struck the truck once more. "How far away?" she inquired. I said, 15 or 20 more minutes. "If the road isn't closed." My phone buzzed in the cup holder, as if suddenly. The emergency alert flashed across the screen as I snatched it up. "Warning of winter storms. Expect delays as westbound I-70 is closed at exit 252 due to a jackknifed semi." I muttered curses to myself. "What?" Amanda inquired. I remarked, "They closed the highway behind us." "Jackknifed semi. We're in the void." She remarked, "So we're stuck between your neighborhood and a wreck." I whispered, "More like between the wreck and nowhere." Already, reception was declining. My phone's signal bars wavered and finally disappeared entirely. Face down, I placed it. "All right," I replied. "New strategy." Amanda pulled her coat closer to her body. "I'm paying attention." I pointed to the just perceptible white lines and remarked, "There's an old service road about a mile up. It takes you to your father's cabin. Jake and I used to camp there." She scowled. "My father's cabin? It has been years since that location was opened." "The last time we visited, the wood stove was still functional," I remarked. "That is our greatest option if we are unable to return to your home. The roads will only grow worse." She briefly closed her eyes. "It's unbelievable that I have to entrust my survival to a 26-year-old. I said, "I'm 27. "Whoa," she said. "Everything changes because of that." She had the ability to throw a line that lightened my chest, even in the midst of a blizzard. As we trudged up the next hill, I slowed even further. The fog and ice seeping in at the windshield margins were too strong for the truck's defroster to defeat. "This is crazy," she muttered. By now, I should have been screaming at the Hallmark Channel and sipping hot chocolate. I said, "You might still." Just in a setting a little more reminiscent of a horror film. She gave me a quick glance while a small smile tugged at her lips. And then her face softened. She said, "I appreciate you coming out tonight." "Really? You were not required to." I said, "Every time there's a breeze, your power goes out. You would freeze in that house if this storm materializes as predicted." "I've got blankets," she objected, "as well as a gas stove." I remarked, "Amanda, your insulation is from about 1982. When the wind strikes it, it rattles." Gazing out at the whirling snow, she let out a sigh. "I'm sorry you're aware of that. I can't even begin to count how many times I've assisted Jake in duct taping your windows." She remarked, "You should be my son's best friend, not my handyman." I gave a shrug. He's in a different state. I was drafted. Joking was simpler than acknowledging the fact that I had always enjoyed being the person she phoned when things broke. The rear steps that needed to be fixed, the creaky door, and the clogged sink. It gave me a sense of need. Observed. Following her divorce from Jake's father a few months prior, such calls had increased in frequency. Light bulbs. The trash disposal. Some moron backed out of her driveway and knocked down the mailbox. I began to notice small things I shouldn't have at that point. When she was focused, she tucked her hair behind her ear. The way she laughed at my dumb jokes despite the exhausted look in her eyes. The way she smiled at me for a bit too long made my stomach turn strangely. I dismissed the ideas and concentrated on the road. I pointed out the hardly perceptible crack in the guardrail and remarked, "There." Service road. Tires crunching through new snow, I turned onto it. The narrow, unplowed road with dark pine trees leaning closely alongside it was much worse. Like it was plowing through wet cement, the truck crawled ahead. She questioned, "Are you certain this is a good idea?" "What does good mean?" I asked. "It's preferable to spending the night in a dead truck or sliding off the main road." She parted her lips to argue, then shut them again and looked directly ahead. Before the front tires met a drift and came to a stop, we had traveled perhaps half a mile. I tried going backwards. The tires whirled pointlessly. "Excellent," I whispered. "We're stranded." As if she could will it to move, Amanda gazed at the hood. "Show me you're kidding." I turned off the wipers and parked the truck. With only the engine ticking and the wind screaming all around us, the sudden silence was nearly deafening. I said, "We're not far away. Maybe less than half a mile." We hiked to the cabin after gathering everything we can carry. "In this." Outside the windshield, she pointed to the whiteout. "Do you think I'm trustworthy?" I inquired. She gave one wobbly laugh. "Until you asked that question, I was doing fine." I retrieved the flashlight, the extra blanket I kept in the cab, and my bulky parka from behind the seat. "Stow away," I said. "We'll be all right if we keep moving, even though it will be cold." Just after the large bend on the left is the cabin. I could discover it as I slept. She zipped up her own jacket after observing me tug on my coat. When she put on her gloves, her hands began to shake a little. She whispered, "You really think we're going to make it?" I looked her in the eyes. "Yes," I said. "I won't allow anything to happen to you. Jake would never pardon me." At that moment, a flash of pain appeared on her face. "All right," she said. "Jake." We entered a wall of cold as soon as we got out of the truck. My breath was stolen by the wind as it sliced through my jeans. Like scorching needles, snowflakes pricked my cheeks. I approached her and extended my hand to assist her in getting down. For a moment, I felt the steady, comfortable weight of her trust as she accepted it, her glove gliding against mine. Heads low, shoulders bowed, we walked through the snow. Under our boots, the road was hardly a suggestion. White and shadow reflected the lighting beam. A few minutes later, Amanda faltered. I steadied her by grabbing her elbow. Her breath was billowing in the air as she leaned into me. She remarked, "I can't feel my face, or my thighs, or anything." "We are close," I remarked. "A little bit more." It was like viewing a ship through fog when the cabin's dark silhouette eventually emerged through the woods. I pointed and said, "There. You see? Told you," she said. "Remind me to say I'm sorry every time I called you a reckless idiot." I answered, "You called me that last week." "Yes," she replied. "I'm going to have to follow that up with an apology." I threw my shoulder into the front door until it creaked open, even though it was stuck from the cold. The interior smelt like old wood and grime. The cold air instantly clogged our breath. I turned the light on and off. The same ancient hut, with 2 narrow beds and thin mattresses, a rickety table, and a stone fireplace. The stove still has a stack of wood. I looked at Amanda. Her cheeks were heated, her hair was damp from the melted snow, and she was trembling violently now. I led her inside and said, "Come on in. I'll start a fire." Teeth chattering, she put her luggage at the door and encircled herself with her arms. "This is crazy," she muttered. "You really convinced me to do this." I was already crouching at the stove, setting up kindling with numb fingers, when I murmured, "You'll thank me when your toes aren't falling off." After observing me for a while, she sat on one of the mattresses with her shoulders still trembling. "If the fire doesn't work and the temperature keeps dropping," she said in a slightly shaky voice. I gave her another look. She concluded quietly, "We'll have to keep each other warm." The truck's comments replayed themselves in my mind. However, we were now isolated in a pitch-black cabin, far from other people, without mobile service, and without a simple way out. As I touched the wood, my hands froze. My throat was instantly dry as I said, "Yeah, we'll I realized that I would need to survive tonight in addition to the storm outside when the first sparks ignited and the fire grew. Like everything else in this cabin, the fire started slowly but eventually ignited, and the wood started to crackle after a few minutes. The walls went from gray to soft gold as the warm sunshine pushed back the shadows. Feeling began to return to my fingertips in the form of agonizing, stinging pins and needles as I held my hands out toward the burner. Amanda's teeth were still chattering behind me. I cleared my throat after realizing how I sounded when I added, "You need to get out of those wet jeans. The snow, that is. They will remain chilly." She raised her eyebrows. Even half frozen, she could still give a look that cut straight through me. "Smooth," she said. "You always have such good lines." I said, "I'm just saying that you don't look good with hypothermia. The trunk on the wall should include some old clothing and blankets. I'll turn around, I guess." She nodded after observing me for a moment as if she was debating whether or not to make fun of me. "All right," she said. "Boy Scout, turn around." The knot in the wooden planks caught my attention as I turned around. I could hear the faint thump of her boots striking the floor and the rustle of fabric behind me. I looked at the stove and gave everything serious thought, including taxes, football, and everything other than my best friend's mother changing clothes 10 feet away. With a slightly strained voice, she remarked, "As a child, this cabin always frightened me. My dad used to bring me up here to build character. I would freeze and swat mosquitoes while he told me stories about elk and drank cheap beer." I remarked, "He would be proud that you're using it in a true emergency." She answered, "I'm pretty sure he'd say, 'Told you so,' about the snow. In the mountains, he never trusted November." She became silent for a while. More rustling. Then, "All right. You are free to turn around." Yes, I did. She had discovered a faded Broncos hoodie that had belonged to her father, as well as an old pair of sweatpants that were rolled at the waist and a bit too big. Her hair was now down and moist at the ends, falling loosely in waves that framed her face. The cold was still causing her cheeks to flush. I was more affected by the sight than I should have been. She noticed that I was staring and asked, "What?" "Nothing," I blurted out. "You simply appear warmer." "Well done, fool." Shuffling toward the stove, she snorted and tightened the blanket about her shoulders. "How about you?" she inquired. "You're completely soaked." I looked down. The melted snow had darkened my jeans. My boots squeezed my socks. I said, "I'll be all right for a while. Fire is carrying out its duty." She scowled. "If you stay in those, you're going to freeze." The thought of stripping in front of her, even partially, caused my mind to go blank, so I insisted, "I'm good." She sighed after examining me for a moment. "Obviously," she replied. "Stubborn. Similar to Jake." Something in my chest twisted at the mention of his name. "How furious do you think he would be at this moment?" "Trying to make it a joke," I asked. "His mother and his best friend are holed up in a cabin during a blizzard." She eased down onto the side of the bed nearest the stove and asked, "On a scale of 1 to 10? "Probably a 12. Facing her, I took a seat on the opposite bed. The distance between us seemed both small and enormous. "You are aware that he has faith in you," she said. "He has always done so. I called you regarding the generator for that reason. Call Ethan if you ever truly need someone," he once advised me. In fact, he appears. At that moment, something warm settled under my ribs. I repeated, "I show up. My brand is that." She whispered softly, "You don't realize how much that meant last year, when the divorce became contentious. When the pipes froze and I was unable to get the garage door to close, I felt like I was failing at everything." I recalled that December evening. She was seated on the kitchen floor, leaning against the cupboard, looking at a pile of legal documents when I arrived to fix the door. She quickly wiped her eyes and said that she was allergic to attorneys. I said, "You weren't failing. You simply had a lot of crap to deal with all at once." With her chin resting on her knees, she embraced them beneath the blanket. She remarked, "You're kind, even when it's not necessary." Sparks flew up the chimney in a little spray as the fire burst. The windows shook in the wind. The cabin moaned as if recalling all the storms it had weathered. She inquired, "How long do you think we're stuck here?" I said, "It depends on the storm. No one will be coming up here tonight if the roadway is closed. We might be able to get the truck out and return to town if it isn't buried by daylight." She inquired, "And if it is buried?" I added, "Then we get a bonus night of cabin life." I'll show you how to use a wood stove to make toast. There was a hint of nervousness in her smile. What? I inquired. After a moment of hesitation, she shook her head. Nothing. Simply put, I can't recall the last time I was by myself with someone I truly trusted in a setting like this. Isn't that good? Not sure where she was heading, I said. It is, she blurted out. It's simply a little frightening. In a different manner. I scowled. How scary. Instead of looking at me, she gazed at the fire. Do you ever realize you've been relying on someone more than you should? She continued softly. Ethan? My heart began to race. What do you mean? Picking at a loose thread on the blanket, she remarked. I mean, you've been there more than anyone else this past year. More than my age group mates. Of course, more than my ex-husband. Sometimes even more than Jake, as he is too busy trying to establish his own life hundreds of miles away. Friends do that, I responded, trying to maintain an even tone. You don't lean over too much. I'm capable of managing it. When she eventually looked up at me, she said, That's not what I'm saying. Her eyes were glistening, not so much from tears as from some feeling she was suppressing. I'm stating that I began to notice foolish things, like being relieved when you hear your pickup pull into the driveway, or searching my phone for your name, or realizing that I was brewing more coffee because I thought you were coming. The back of my neck began to heat up. My mouth became parched. I whispered, Amanda, you don't have to, she interrupted. I know I don't have to say it. However, it feels more dishonest to sit here and act as though there is nothing strange about us being in a cabin, alone, in the middle of a snowstorm, after I just told you we'd have to keep each other warm. The air between us thickened and changed. What are you saying? Even though I knew in my heart, I asked. She inhaled deeply. Somewhere in the midst of bad lawyers, broken pipes, and late-night calls about the water heater, I stopped thinking of you as just my son's best friend, she muttered. My heart struck my ribs hard. I began to consider you as. She took a swallow. As Ethan, the guy who never fails to show up. The man who can recall my coffee-drinking habits. The man sitting across from me at the moment is someone I'm all too aware of. Her candor struck me more forcefully than the outside breeze. Before I could stop myself, I got up and walked across the little hallway between the beds. I took a seat beside her, keeping a safe distance so that I could feel her warmth without touching her. Amanda, I continued quietly, you understand that this is where I'm meant to say that you're simply stressed, that the storm is speaking, that you'll forget about this once the electricity is restored and you're shouting at Hallmark once more. She laughed breathlessly. Do you believe that? I gave her a serious look. The wrinkles in the corners of her eyes were caused by worry and laughter. The stiffness behind the surface of her shoulders. The way she was attempting to be both honest and courageous. No, I replied. I believe I've spent months trying to persuade myself of that. Perhaps more time. She looked into my eyes. There are others besides me, I said, not even close. Once more, silence descended upon us, but this time it wasn't void. It hummed, full of things we hadn't yet spoken. She whispered, This is wrong, isn't it? Me and you. Speaking in this manner. I said, Depends who you ask. Age difference, history, Jake, it's messy, some would say. They would also be correct. You too, she inquired. What are your thoughts? I reflected on all the times I had talked myself out of experiencing certain emotions. I had always reminded myself that she was not allowed. Every time I saw her laugh at whatever I said, I experienced a pain in my chest. I replied, I say it's complicated. I do, however, also claim that I care about you. A great deal. Enough that it feels like the wrong thing to sit here and act as though I don't. As if she had been holding her breath all year, she let it out gently. As if to remind us both, she said, Jake trusts you. When he left, he asked you to watch out for me. I understand, I replied. And I have. Nothing will change about it. Her knuckles unintentionally brushed my leg as her hand moved beneath the cover. It was a slight touch, yet it made me feel better. She said, And if what I need isn't just someone to fix my pipes? If it's more complicated than that, what do I need? I choked on my response. The cabin shook from the increased howl of the wind outside. When the fire broke out, sparks flew up the chimney. With nowhere to flee and only the truth standing between us and the fading light, I came to the realization that this storm had not only physically imprisoned us. At last, it had encircled the emotions that we had been evading. That night, I reclined on the thin mattress and gazed at the black ceiling with my eyes open. Only a faint orange glow remained from the flames. Above us, shadows moved on the beams. Although the wind outside had subsided, occasionally a gust would rattle the window as if to warn us that the storm was still present. Amanda was a few feet away on the other bed. Her respiration was slow and erratic, but I could hear it. After that final query about what she required being more complicated, neither of us had spoken much. It seemed as though we had both approached a line and were now standing on our toes, unable to move due to fear. "Are you awake?" she murmured into the shadows. "Yes," I said. "You?" She laughed softly and without humor. "It's pretty hard to fall asleep when my mind keeps going over all of my bad choices." I said, "I don't think it was stupid to come up here. With no heat back at your house or on the road, the storm would have been worse." Quietly, she stated, "I wasn't talking about the storm." I looked in her direction. Her outline was barely visible to me, with her hair flowing over the pillow and the cover pulled up to her chest. I said, "Amanda, just for the record. Additionally, nothing you said earlier was stupid." "Good," she whispered. "So, telling your son's best friend that you can't stop noticing him is normal." "If it's true," I said. She fell silent for a while. "Are you sorry?" she inquired. "I'm saying it. You were responding." I pondered that for a moment. I reflected on all the times I'd stayed up late in my own Denver apartment, wondering what would happen if I stopped acting fake with her. "No," I replied. "I'm sorry it took me so long to stop deceiving myself." The old springs creaked as she moved on the bed. "If you were just a guy, this would be so much easier," she remarked. "A neighbor, a colleague, not Ethan." "I understand," I replied. "Believe me." "Do you?" she questioned. "Because we are not allowed to remain in this small bubble when this storm passes." We returned to the city. Returning to Jake's call from Phoenix, he hopes you're watching out for his mother and asks if the pipes are holding up. His name was there once more, like a check that we needed to cash. I spoke carefully and continued. "He trusts me because I don't lie to him. Or to you. I won't begin right now." She let out a breath. "What does that signify then? Will you be phoning him from the cabin?" "Hey man, your mom is safe, which is good news." "The strange news is..." I flinched. "No, not from this location. Not in this manner. However, at some point, yes, if this," I gestured between us, though she couldn't see it, "is going to be anything more than a snowy confession. He is entitled to know." She questioned, "And if he hates you for it?" I answered, "I'll live with it. I can't bear to spend the next 10 years acting as though I never experienced the emotions I do now out of fear of having a difficult conversation." Once more, she was silent. There was a gentle crackle of flames. She said, almost to herself, "You really see 10 years?" I said, "I'm not sure what I see. However, I am aware that you will always be a part of my life in 5 years. Even prior to tonight." It's simply to avoid having to acknowledge what that meant, I always altered the picture. She chuckled quietly. "Are you aware that I'm older than you?" "Hardly," I murmured. "Hardly," she said again. "Ethan, my knees are the size of a 38-year-old. Hardly touches on it." I said, "I'm 27, not 15. I cover my own expenses. I work. I am aware of what I am doing." "Do you?" she questioned. I reflected on my menial office work at the HVAC firm, my little apartment in the heart of the city, and my weekends spent commuting up to Evergreen to fix whatever needed to be fixed at her property. "The majority of the time," I said. This feels honest for the first time in a long time." A rustle of covers was heard. Her feet then made contact with the ground. She perched on the edge of my bed after crossing the narrow space between them. Her face was less guarded and softer in the little firelight. Open but exhausted. "May I ask you a question?" she asked. I answered, "Anything." "Do you see Jake's mom first when you look at me?" she said in a hushed voice. "Or me?" I didn't think twice. "You," I said. "Always you." Her shoulders seemed to relax. "That's frightful," she muttered. I gave a small smile. "Greetings from my final year." She gave me a prolonged gaze. Then she found my hand by reaching under the covers. This time, her fingers felt warm against mine. "No. Gloves. No justifications." She remarked, "I'm not sure what to do with this." I said, "We don't have to make all the decisions tonight. We simply must be truthful. With one another. With ourselves." She went on, And with Jake? Yes, I said. With Jake. When the timing is right. She gave my hand a squeeze. There's no turning back once we cross that line, she stated. No, I was joking. The snow was speaking. I understand, I replied. I think that's the main idea. She looked into my eyes, searching for something, perhaps determination, or an escape route that was non-existent. At last, she said, all right. I must then know something else. Shoot, I said. She inhaled. Are you going to vanish when things get messy if we explore this together? She added cautiously. When does Jake lose his temper? When do neighbors converse? When I'm having a rough day and vent to you? I gave a headshake. No, she remarked. You say that like it's easy. It's not, I answered. But when things went tough, everyone else in your life disappeared. Your former partner. Your parents. After the divorce, you lost half of your pals. I refused to put my name on the list. Her eyes glowed. You say that all the time? Like what? She said. Like you mean it. I said, I don't know how else to talk. Neither of us moved for a moment. Then she leaned somewhat closer. Her breath was palpable on my skin. Tell me a real story, she muttered. I took a swallow. I give you more thought than I ought to. Her smile was simultaneously modest, melancholy, and hopeful. One more. I remarked. I enjoy fixing things at your house because it allows me to see you. Not only because I know how to use tools well. Absently, she rubbed the back of my hand with her thumb. She said, one more. I looked her in the eyes. I said, there's a part of me that wishes I didn't have to every time I leave your driveway at night. Her breath caught. She sat there for a while, staring at me as if she knew my face by heart. She then slowly released my hand and got to her feet. My chest constricted until she stepped closer between my knees and gave me a gentle shoulder push. She whispered, lie down. My heart was racing. Amanda, just lie down, she said again. Please. Yes, I did. Staring up at her silhouette against the flickering light, I reclined on the flat pillow. For a moment, she paused. Then she slipped down till we were shoulder to shoulder, lifting the edge of the blanket and climbing in next to me. Her weight caused the mattress to drop. Through the thin cloth between us, the warmth of her body was radiating. You're trembling, I remarked. I'm not chilly, she answered. My heart was pounding so hard that it felt like it may rock the bed, but neither was I. With one hand lightly resting on my chest, she nestled her head against my shoulder. I instinctively wrapped my arm over her, as if it had always been there. Is this okay? She said softly. I answered, my voice hardly steady. Yeah. More than all right. We lay there for a time, enjoying the sound of the fire crackling and the breeze. Through the hoodie, my fingertips followed patterns of idleness on her shoulder. She mirrored my slow breathing. She whispered, this is the keeping each other warm part. I chuckled quietly. It was exactly what I thought you would say in the truck. Oh yes? She asked. Can you picture my frozen toes and my dad's hoodie? Very much, I replied. I'm a straightforward man. She pressed her smile to my chest. It wasn't about bodies and the intimacy. It was about the way the stiffness in her shoulders gradually subsided and she relaxed into me. For the first time in a long time, I felt right. I felt her fingers snake into my shirt after a lengthy period of silence. I'm afraid, she said. As a result of the storm? I inquired. She answered, of everything after it. I swiveled my head and gave her hair a quick, spontaneous kiss. Then join me in being afraid. I answered. We don't need to act courageous. We simply must be truthful. She let out a tremulous breath that became more steady. All right, she muttered. Then be honest. She tilted her face up and shifted slightly. I could make out her large, inquisitive eyes in the low light. Ethan, will you regret it when the sun comes up if I kiss you now? She asked. My heartbeat went into overdrive. No, I replied. I would only regret not letting you. As if she were giving herself one more chance to change her mind, she scrutinized me for another heartbeat. She then closed the distance and gave me a gentle, almost tentative kiss, as if she were experimenting with the form of a word she had never said aloud. It was a slow, cautious, and warm kiss. Not in a hurry. Not an error. A decision. She pressed her forehead on my jaw as we eventually separated. Well, she muttered, panting, we definitely went too far. I said, my heart still pounding. Yeah, we did. The wind outside began to pick up speed once more, screaming about the cabin as if it were trying to blow everything away. I held the lady I shouldn't have wanted within, in that tiny, warm pool of light, and knew that the implications of tomorrow would be far more severe than any snowdrift. However, at that moment, with her hand on my chest and her heartbeat against my side, I was certain of one thing. There was no turning back. The brightness was the first thing I noticed when I woke up. Softer than the glare of the previous night, a pale gray was seeping in around the drapes. The weight against my chest was the second thing I became aware of. Amanda. Her fingers were still delicately curled in my shirt as she rested her touch over my heart. Under the cover, her leg was hooked over mine as if she had taken the spot and had forgotten to release it. I felt as though the world outside the cabin wasn't real for a moment as I lay there listening to her breathing and the soft crackling of the dying fire. Then the previous night's recollections rushed back. Her murmur, her integrity, that initial cautious kiss. After that, we remained that way, close, cozy, and spoke softly until the words grew hazy and sleep eventually dragged us down. No crazy rush. The lines we had already crossed were the only ones crossed. Only us. She gave a little sigh and moved away from me. When she recognized where she was, her eyes flickered open, initially blurry but then becoming more focused, as well as who she was with. "Oh my God," she whispered, stepping back slightly. "Last night, we didn't just dream, did we?" With my voice still hoarse from sleep, I shook my head. No, that was really real. With her hair in a chaotic halo about her face and a blanket draped around her shoulders, she gently sat up. She briefly gave off the impression that she would lose her mind. She then inhaled and looked directly into my eyes. "Are you sorry?" she inquired. It was there. The question that had been lingering ever since she gave me a kiss. I leveled myself with her by pushing myself up on one elbow. "No," I replied. "Do you?" She glanced at her hands before turning back to face me. Yes, there was fear, but there was also a persistent undercurrent. "No," she muttered. "I don't." Something tense inside my chest relaxed with relief. "All right," I replied. "All right." The first step, her lips twitched. "Now there are steps." "There must be," I murmured. "We can't simply leave and act as if nothing took place. Furthermore, we cannot leave here and pretend that we have been covertly dating for months." She admitted, "I'm not very happy with our options. I kiss someone who still gets carded half the time he buys beer. My son trusts you. And the neighbors call me the divorcee on the hill." "I don't," I objected. She looked at me. "Ethan, last month, you sent me a picture showing the cashier requesting your ID and then his manager's ID. I murmured, "That one time, okay." The serious expression I had seen in the kitchen that evening with the legal documents took the place of her slight grin. She said, "Jokes are helping, but we still need to talk about Jake." I swung my legs over the side of the bed and sat up, excuses to swing by and check the pipes. I added, "It appears that we may be having dinner somewhere other than your kitchen. It appears to be awkward discussions with those who don't understand. And those people who will." At the corner, her lips pulled upward. "Like who?" "Mrs. Klein, your neighbor," I said. "She believes we are dating already. As long as you have someone nearby. She told me last month that she approves of you robbing the cradle." Amanda's coffee caused her to choke. "She what?" I gave a shrug. "You don't realize how much elderly women observe the streets." She laughed and shook her head. Then her expression darkened. She questioned, "And if Jake says no? If he claims that he is unable to look at you in the same manner? What if he tells me I've messed up?" My stomach turned over. I replied, "Then I'll give him space. I won't push it. I'll bear the consequences. If it means it, I'll be the antagonist in his tale for a time." She said, "I don't want you to be the bad guy. There are times when loving someone entails putting up with being the villain for a while." I added, "As long as you are aware of your motivation." She gazed at me as though she had never seen me before. "When did you mature so much?" I stated. It was around that time that I realized I wanted more than just best friend inscribed on my forehead. She got up, circled the table, and paused next to my chair. She gently removed the mug from my grasp and placed it on the table. She said, "Look at me, Ethan." Yes, I did. Her fingers brushed my cheekbones as she clasped my face with both hands. "I need you to keep this in mind when this storm passes and we return home and the world begins to spin the way it always does," she said. "Do you recall what?" I inquired. "That I decided on this," she remarked. "You failed to persuade me to do it. I wasn't pushed by you. I went into it with open eyes after you gave me the truth. This is also my decision, regardless of what happens with Jake, the neighbors, or anybody else. With a constricted throat, I nodded. All right. She gave a tiny but fierce smile. Well, she muttered. The reason is that I'm sick of believing that life simply happens to me. Instead of watching the storm from the porch, I would like to be the one to venture out into it for once. I pulled her in by putting my hands around her waist. She settled between my knees with ease. Now, storms are kind of our thing, I remarked. Seems to be, she said. We shared another kiss, less tentative but still cautious and new. Something that had been ensigned in our hearts for a long time seemed like it was being sealed. The sky was brilliant and dazzling over the mountains by the time the plows eventually arrived at the service road in the afternoon, and, like the cabin again, a quiet haven in the middle of the world. In a tiny wave, she raised her hand. I followed suit. My phone buzzed on the nightstand as I slept in my own bed in my tiny Denver apartment later that night. The city sounds buzzing outside instead of the wind. Amanda survived the first night after returning. The house is doing well. I'm all right. I'm afraid, but all right. Before I could respond, I received another text. Amanda, I appreciate you keeping me warm in a variety of ways. I grinned foolishly as I gazed at the words for a long moment. Me, at any time. Remember, we begin to be brave tomorrow. A pause. Next, Amanda, I agree. We will be honest tomorrow. My heart felt lighter and heavier than it has in years as I put the phone down and stared up at the ceiling. Yes, we were trapped in the snowstorm. However, it had also accomplished something that I could never have done on my own. Everything was peeled away until the truth was all that remained. In that cabin, my best friend's mother and I had gone too far. And for the first time in a long time, I felt prepared to face whatever lay ahead, with her, rather than fleeing from it.
If you felt good in this story, stay with us, like, subscribe, and join me in the next one. Thank you.